Hexagram number 6. Conflict. Stop asking why. Wondering why things are the way they are or what to do about them is in conflict with the creative. For in trying to find comprehensive answers or in seeking the security of knowing, we distrust the cult that the creative will show the way and will unravel the ambiguity of the situation at just the right time. The heaven trigram Ching, which represents peace, order, inner balance, and independence, is being undermined by Khan. The trigram of active white water. This symbolizes conflict. The hexagram concerns both self-conflict as when we ask, why is life this way? And adversative situations in which we argue. However, self-conflict is the ultimate cause of all other forms of conflict. Self-conflict arises when we view God, the sage, fate, other people, or ourselves negatively. As an adversary, such conflicts form because we misunderstand the way the cosmos works and our part in the scheme of things. Ideas that are contrary to our true natures and to our inner sense of truth always create inner conflict. While we may successfully suppress our inner sense of truth, a subliminal inner argument continues. Receiving this hexagram confirms that we are in a state of self-conflict. By its nature, self-conflict is a vortex created by our ego, in which we seek to be released from the pressures created by doubt and fear. In this pursuit, we seek answers that will satisfy our emotional cravings. All reasons serve that end. While such reasons may seem reasonable, they are not the creations of an objective mind. Since they do not solve problems, holes in our thinking keep appearing. Therefore, we experience continuing rounds of argument. Caught in this vortex, we would be unable to recognize or understand the correct answer, even if it were presented to us. Therefore, the hexagram counsels us to withdraw from all questions, disengage from looking at what disturbs us, and leave everything unresolved. This is to halt halfway. We go through to the end when we adopt a solution just to end the ambiguity or to be released from its disagreeable pressure. Such action is certain to bring misfortune. We need to gain a true perspective. This is possible once we emotionally disengage from the problem. We view others as adversaries when we give up on them. We view ourselves as an adversary when we mistakenly assume that we have to accomplish everything all by ourselves. Sometimes we mistakenly think that we are meant to approve of others' insensitivity or wrong acts, a misunderstanding that gives rise to inner conflict. While we are not meant to approve wrong situations, neither are we meant to become alienated. Alienation is yet another emotional involvement that clouds all issues. Caught in the vortex of self-conflict, we are unable to see that the sage and fate work together to bring things to completion. The sage leads and guides, while fate determines the way events twist and turn. Fate presents us with adversity, either when we are on the wrong path or when adversity provides the only contrast by which we may be taught important lessons. Other types of conflict revolve around crossroads situations, deadlocked about which road to take. We continually mull the question over. We need to cease inner conflict and disengage from the problem, and the solution will come of itself at the right time. If we have already made a decision and passed through the crossroads, we should avoid looking back to see if we have made the wrong move. Instead, we should go forward. If we have made a mistake, our sincerity in trying to relate correctly will either correct the situation or neutralize its bad effects. Sometimes we receive this hexagram as preparation for a situation that might give rise to conflict. We should prepare not by structuring our response, but by being alert to clues provided by events that indicate the appropriate response. We should respond only to the essentials of the situation and carefully avoid being drawn into conflict. If we get off course, we should retreat. If we find ourselves participating in conflict, we should quickly withdraw. In all situations, it is necessary to act only as truth and necessity require. Even though doing this sometimes entails being isolated from others, we are never required by fate to be loyal to what is wrong, so that we carry through acts that cause self-conflict. Even if it seems difficult to do what is right, we should remember that heaven helps those who cling to the life raft of inner truth. Halting halfway also refers to situations in which we have gone too far. For example, after having withdrawn as necessity has required, we condemn those who have erred. We avoid conflict when we refrain from making sweeping judgments about the situation, such as deciding that our withdrawal is forever. It is important to leave the future up to the higher power. In all his transactions, the superior man carefully considers the beginning. Conflict with others can generally be avoided at the beginning if we carefully determine fair and just terms. In business relationships, the written contract serves this purpose, but contracts are reliable only if they correspond with what everyone in his heart would consider to be just. As just contracts prove helpful in business relationships, thus do they in marriage. To put that relationship on a firm footing, one must take the time to allow an understanding of fair and just principles to develop. However, before we can successfully marry another, we must first marry ourselves. For being true to ourselves is the only basis for loyalty to others. Marrying oneself does not mean we rigidly hold to dogma or to belief systems. It means that it is our responsibility to be true to our inner feelings and to our personal experiences of truth. We do not allow ourselves to be impaled by logic, persuasion, leverage, or seduction, but by insight that comes to us on its own terms. The person who has married himself is unwilling to do things that cause a loss of his inner balance and integrity. He cannot forswear to anyone else his relationship with the higher power, or compromise his dignity or integrity merely to respond to another's selfish demands and expectations. Others need to realize in advance that we are committed to such personal integrity in order to avoid misunderstandings. This is not something we may tell them, but is something they will understand if we are firm and unwavering in following our values. Once we have gained another's respect because of our love of the good, we will have no reason to lose his loyalty. If either now or in the past we have promised to participate in an act that is fundamentally wrong or that is detrimental to our spiritual growth, the contract or promise does not require honoring. If we are inwardly firm in adhering to this principle, we will not need, if we are inwardly firm in adhering to this principle, we will not need to force the issue. Some way out of the situation will show itself. In dealing with the situation, we must be firm, but not personally offensive. As the fifth line, modesty counsels. Hexagram 15. If we are neither firm in our values nor just in our requirements, All understandings, arguments, and contracts will eventually be undermined, for people sense our laxity. Where we are lax, we will be tested. Where we fail to uphold our principles, we will lose others' trust. It is a little like training a horse. If we never let him eat along the trail, the horse will not develop the annoying habit of suddenly stopping at the favorite spot of grass. Allowing him to do so just once creates the problem for the next several times we pass that spot. If we seek to be free of conflict, we must be consistent in maintaining a correct attitude. Changing line number 1. If one does not perpetuate the affair, in the end, good fortune comes. The easiest time to retreat from conflict is at the beginning, when we first allow ourselves to become involved in trying to change the situation. If we cannot withdraw or disengage, then we need to examine our attitude for egotism. Changing line number 2. One cannot engage in conflict. The people of his town, 300 households, remain free of guilt. The ego looks at externals, weighs, measures, calculates, estimates, and concludes in an effort to get around the way things work, as if its major businesses were to resist fate. We should retreat from such conflict, keeping inwardly still until verbal rationalizing ends, and clarity can be restored. The superior man sees in his situation the creative ingredients needed to solve the problems he encounters, and he works with the ingredients to produce a beneficial effect for all. If he can see no way to have a beneficial effect, he retreats and waits until the situation changes. Changing line number 3. To nourish oneself on ancient virtue induces perseverance. Danger: if you are in the service of a king, seek not works. Ancient virtue calls for perseverance, accomplishing things from a background position. This is difficult because our inferior man always seeks to have acknowledgement for what has been achieved. Lacking this recognition, it resists, and in an or else mood pressures us to give up. We seek prestige, to be known for our work. When we self-confidently expostulate to establish ourselves as knowledgeable, or argue to prove we are right, as in, didn't I tell you so? And when we seek to be the center of influence in the hopes of accomplishing something dramatic, such assertiveness comes from our ego. the white knight in shining armor who strives aggressively to save the situation. Ancient virtue would have us modestly take the low road of patient perseverance and reticence, rather than the high road of brilliance. We should not brandish the light, but allow it to shine through us as if we're not there. Danger also comes from the fear of conviction that others are irrevocably committed to doing wrong, or that they think, or that they are incapable of perceiving the truth and of realizing their mistakes. This fear causes us to intervene. As this line assures us, we need not fear. We cannot lose what we have already created through our good example. Meanwhile, we need to depose the white knight, our masquerading inferior man, sometimes unrealizing that we must achieve results from an entirely invisible position outside the scene or from the sideline. Our ego interjects that we cannot possibly win from this position. It is true, nevertheless, that great things are achieved in this way, just as in the dark of the womb all things are brought into being. When we can trust the creative process and wait in the appropriate attitude, the growth process continues and birth occurs. Changing line number 4. One cannot engage in conflict. One turns back and submits to fate, changes one's attitude and finds peace in perseverance. Good fortune, inner conflict motivates us to strive to influence and to try to serve as a fulcrum for action. We do this because our inner attitude is infected with ambition to make swift progress. We would skip the slow step-by-step way of the sage if doing so would put us closer to our goal. Thus, desire motivates us to sacrifice the correct way to make progress. Desire occurs when we doubt the creative process. Doubting, we say, the creative process does not serve my ends. In doubting and desiring, we lose the inner independence that empowers truth. To avoid this kind of conflict, we need to become path-orientated and patient rather than goal-orientated and impatient. In our desire, we forget that step at hand, that of patient waiting is the only step that leads to our goal. Waiting patiently is the important work of the moment. Peace comes from accepting that only slow progress endures. Changing line number 5. To contend before him brings supreme good fortune. we may safely turn the matter over to the sage and to fate. In this way, the conflict will be resolved in the correct way. Changing line number 6. Even if by chance a leather belt is bestowed on one, by the end of the morning it will have been snatched away 3 times. We insist on mulling the issue over and over. Thus we become more and more embroiled in self-conflict and doubt. The issue is not to be resolved in this way. We can argue all we like with fate, but nothing will be changed. This ends hexagram number 6.